Hi again folks, how you all doing? This old Hornby Duchess of Sutherland is a return visitor to Auchterduthie. It was originally sent to me by Thornton about a year ago to sort out its inconsistent running, and he got back in touch with me recently to tell me that it started misbehaving again and he couldn't figure out what was wrong. So he asked if he could send it to me again to see if I could see what the problem is. So let's turn on the power. That's full power. It's pulling about 300 milliamps, but it's bouncing around a bit. So when I looked at this before, if I remember correctly, it was just a case of cleaning it up and making sure there was good continuity between the wheels and the motor, and I gave the motor a service. But yeah, I'm suspicious that there's something more seriously up this time. Let's shove it into the shed and we'll see what's up. Okay then, I don't think this has happened before. I've had a couple of locomotives sent back to me after I've returned them because something happened, and I just said just send them back to me and I'll sort it. But I've not had one come back to me a while later, so this will be quite interesting to see what's up with this. Yeah, I mean, what was happening to me doesn't sound like a continuity issue. It's like the motor's not got any power. So I'm kind of suspecting the armature's maybe gone, or there's maybe a problem with the magnet. So I think I'm going to test the locomotive first on the test track using probably the tender from my Mallard. I know that's got a perfectly good ring field in it, so we'll hook that up and see if this performs okay, just to rule out any possible little issue with the locomotive. Right, let's see if this runs. No problem at all. So given that I gave this locomotive a good going over when I worked on it before, and it just performed absolutely fine there with my Mallard tender, I'm not going to look into this anymore. I think it's absolutely fine. The wheels are nice and clean. Yeah, no problems with the locomotive. So I gave this a full service, a clean up and everything. Everything was fine. So what's suddenly started happening? As I say, I kind of suspect the armature, but we'll see. Yeah, see, that's hardly turning. Bit more in that direction, and it's quite rattly sounding. It's quite raspy. So let's take it to bits and see if we can see what's up. If it is a dodgy armature, I think I've got spares. Go. D-clip, D-gear. Ooh. Yeah, there's a lot of carbon build-up in there. An awful lot. Yeah, I think replacing the brushes with new ones would be a good idea. I mean, that's black. And it's not through over lubrication or anything, that's just the brushes deteriorating. But we'll clean the commutator up and we'll test the armature. Give it a good scoosh first. It shouldn't need going over with T-cut, I wouldn't have thought, if that's just carbon. Yeah, see, that's not the normal caked on gunk that you get with a over lubricated or old model. That's like the brushes have just, well, don't know what's happened to them. Between that pole and that pole, what we got? 16. 16. 16. So it's kind of looking like the brushes. Yep. Just needed new brushes. That back on. Right. See if this runs. Right, okay. Let's see if this runs. Oh, come on. Right, I don't think the problem was just brushes. I think there's something else going on here. Yeah, I think we need to have another look. I think I'm going to pull the wheels off this. I'm just wondering if the axles have got oily. Leave them off. Give them a clean. Yeah, it seems to have got itself quite dirty since February 24. Right, so let's take this back. But basically, I've just serviced it again. And we'll see. You know, the new brushes certainly improved the running performance, but it, yeah, it was still suffering from some kind of continuity issue. Right. Let's try this now. Turn on the power. Nothing happens until you touch the motor. Seems to go better in reverse, but in forwards, it's again nothing. Touch the tender, off it goes. Yeah, a bit of a puzzle. I think I'm going to stick this up on the rollers to have a fiddle around with it. Right, power on. And it runs. Of course it would. There we go, that's what it does. It kind of just stops. Right, I gave this a wee run on the layout. I didn't film it because there's workmen cutting into the roads not too far away outside the railway room, and it's a bit noisy. But yeah, it ran okay, and I think, you know, if I give it a run in, I think it'll be okay, given that I've fitted new brushes. It'll need a bit of a run-in period. We shall give it a run in, but it's beer o'clock, so I shall come back to this tomorrow. Okay, so this is the next day. Off camera, I've been messing about with this motor because it was running, but it was just showing hesitancy, and I could see, you know, the amp meter that was bouncing up and down, which it shouldn't do, and particularly in reverse, it became very stoppy-starty, and I stuck it on the rolling road and let it run for a while, and after about 10 minutes, it started to stutter and almost stop. So I was like, what is going on with this? So I took it apart, cleaned it, put it back together again. I noticed the magnet was a little bit loose, so I packed it out with copper tape, and that certainly quietened it down and made it run an awful lot quieter. So that was good, but I still couldn't get it to run smoothly. It was still showing a bit of hesitancy. I made sure there was no connection issue between the locomotive and tender. I cleaned the axles again using the rotary tool. Cleaned the wheels with the rotary tool. I cleaned everything, put it back together again, and it was still being hesitant. So I gave it another good run, and then I took it apart again, and I noticed that the commutator, initially I thought it was just dirty, but it actually looks scorched to me. So you can see the copper tape packing around the magnet. But that commutator, yeah, there's a bit of carbon on it, but it looks a little bit scorched, especially between the poles. So I tried adjusting the tension of, you know, the brush springs, but I took this out again and had a look at it, a kind of close look, and I think the commutator isn't perfectly level. I think one of the poles is slightly higher up than the others, and that would explain why this isn't running too well. And it would also explain why, after I serviced it before and it seemed to run okay, it would carbonize so badly over a relatively short period of time. If that commutator isn't perfect, if the poles aren't all perfectly level, one of them just a little bit higher, you'll get uneven action going on with the brushes, and that causes sparking, and yeah, it's not good. I've seen it before, and the only solution is to replace the armature. So I've got one here, so we need to pull this armature out and replace it and see if that solves the problem. Getting the old one out is easy enough. Give it a tap, and out it comes. This pole here is kind of raised up a bit at the edge. The whole disc that the poles sit on seems to be kind of warped. Whereas this one seems much better. So we'll give it a go, and we'll see what happens. Right, now we'll get a little nut with black tack. Stick that on there. I'll give that a wee squeeze in the vise just to get that pinion gear on. Should do it. Got this part together, and then we'll see if that has made a difference. I think it will. Another possible problem with this is the gears seem a bit loose. There's an awful lot of play on the gears. So I'm wondering if a new set of gears would actually be a good idea for it. Still the same. So I gave this thing a good service, cleaned it, changed the brushes, put brand new brushes in. I've replaced the armature because the old armature, I do think it is slightly iffy. But this thing is still very stoppy-starty. And it's not the connection between the locomotive and the tender, because if I put my mallard tender onto this, it runs absolutely fine. I've cleaned the little brass peg at the front of the tender that connects, plugs into the drawbar. Gave that a good polish. I took the axles out, took the wheels off, polished the axles, but it still just runs really badly. I really thought swapping the armature would sort it. I've actually got a whole replacement motor here. It's missing a wire, but I can steal the one off that. I'm just going to try this to see if this runs okay. Right, okay, so this is actually a couple of days later. I was kind of busy yesterday, but I did finally get to the problem with this. And it turned out to be something pretty simple. And I should have spotted it much, much sooner because I've encountered it before with one of my own locomotives. But there you go. This did have a number of issues, so it's kind of easy to get a bit distracted with them all, because all of them, would have contributed to the poor running of this. But that specific issue of just having to touch the motor to get it run, I should have known what that was much sooner than I did. I swapped the armature out, and I secured the magnet with a bit of copper shielding tape, thinking that would solve the problem. But I then noticed that this spindle here is exceptionally worn. Just get the endoscope on it. You can just see there that spindle is pretty worn, and that causes the gear to be loose and will affect running performance. So that was another thing that was wrong with this. So I swapped this out with the spare motor that I had, thinking that'll be it, that'll solve the problem. And it didn't. It still ran hesitantly. And that was when it kind of dawned on me what was going on. So what was happening was that when you screwed in these screws that hold the weights in, they also hold the motor casing in. It also holds that in. And what was happening when you tightened them up, the motor casing and the tender frame were not sitting square. The motor casing was actually sitting at a very slight angle when you screwed these down tight, and that meant when this was connected up to the locomotive, it was lifting these wheels just a little bit, just enough to cause an intermittent connection. So what I tried to do with my locomotive when this happened was I tried to bend the drawbar down a bit, thinking if the drawbar was a little bit lower, the tender would sit on the track better, and I ended up snapping off the drawbar. Don't try bending these drawbars, which are just part of the die cast of this pony truck. Leave them alone. So all I did was just backed off the screws a bit on the weights. So, you know, the motor casing's quite loose in the tender frame, and that sorted it. It ran absolutely fine after that. A very simple problem, and one I've encountered before. I should have spotted it straight away. But yeah, this did have a dodgy armature, a worn spindle, a loose magnet, and very worn brushes. You know, all these things contribute to poor running. So, you know, I sorted them all in turn. But yeah, at the end of the day, it was the badly fitting tender frame. But I think even with you know, if I spotted it straight away and backed off those screws, I think it probably still would have run badly because of all the other problems. But anyway, got there in the end. I'll stick this on the test track just to let you see how it runs now. Okay, so turn on the power. And away it goes. So there is a question of why this was running fine after I serviced it a couple of years ago, but you know, had these problems now. I think the dodgy commutator, not the commutator not being completely flat, wore the brushes down quicker, caused a lot of carbonisation, and that's what was making the motor barely run. The issue with the tender frame and the motor casing, yeah, that would cause intermittent running, but I think it would probably be okay, under speed. Once it was going, it would probably be okay. And maybe when you hooked it up to some coaches, actually, it would have been all right. But I just wasn't satisfied with the way it was running. But sorted that. But yeah, I think it's just the age of the model. These old models that they need a lot of looking after. Right, we'll get this pulled out the shed. Okay then, out she comes. So that's Thornton's Duchess sorted again. Hopefully it'll be good for longer this time, but as I say, these old models need maintenance and fiddling with to keep them running, but I think this will be fine now. Yeah, this had multiple issues, which I think have just got worse since the last time I looked at it, and this time a replacement motor was in order, as well as backing off those screws, something I really should have spotted much sooner. Runs pretty nicely now though, so I shall get it packed up and sent back to Thornton. Catch you later, folks.